my water just broke. I felt like things really intensify.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt-Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place for women to come together to share their childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from women all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Peanut. Peanut is an app that helps you make meaningful connections throughout all stages of motherhood. Peanut provides a safe space for mothers, expectant mothers, and those trying to conceive to build friendships, ask questions, and find support by introducing you to others nearby who are at a similar stage in life. Peanut provides access to a community who is there to listen, share information, and offer valuable advice, whether it's understanding IVF, adoption, pregnancy, baby's first years, or beyond. Peanut is a place to connect with other moms in the thick of it. I've been loving using Peanut myself. I just signed up and you're able to go in there and choose what stage of motherhood you're at, whether you're trying to conceive or pregnant or have babies and what their ages are. And then it'll find groups for you to join with people near you or topic-based groups to get your questions answered. You can select a bunch of different interests and it's all super secure. And my favorite part is that it creates a special feed for you to go through and see people posting with similar things. So I tried it out just for fun with trying to conceive and saw that, you could see people sharing their pregnancy tests and everybody giving their input. So it's kind of like a very personalized and focused version of other social media apps that you might use. So stay tuned at the end of this episode and I'll be talking to Trisha from Peanut all about the app. And you can download it for free today at thebirthhour.com/peanut or by searching for Peanut in the App Store. Today's birth story guest is Genny, and Genny's going to share 2 unmedicated Hypnobabies births, the first at a birth center and the second at Homebirth. It was fun to hear her story because her husband Dave actually came on and shared on our partner podcast back in November with my husband, and so it was really cool to hear the story from both perspectives. If you're not familiar with our partner podcast, this is our Patreon perk podcast at the co-producer level. So if you head over to patreon.com/birthhour or thebirthhour.com/support, you can see the different tiers and options there. And it's just a monthly donation towards the podcast. And then in return, you get fun perks. And one of those is the partner podcast at the co-producer tier. And those come out every single Friday with my husband interviewing all different types of partners about all different types of birth. So check that out at patreon.com/birthhour. All right, let's get to Genny's birth story. Hi, Genny. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Hi, Bryn. Thanks for having me.
Can you start by telling listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Yes. We live here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm native to the area, and my husband, he's lived pretty much all over the world. He's a military pilot as well as a commercial pilot. We've been married for 5 years, and we have a 3-year-old little girl, and our son is almost a year and a half.
All right. Well, I know we're going to hear both stories today. So let's start with finding out you were pregnant with your first.
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew when we got married that we wanted to start trying to have children right away and didn't really consider the fact that, the timing would definitely play a role in that. And him being gone at least twice a month for a couple weeks would be a factor in working that out. So we tried for about a year and said, we're going to go see a specialist because we're not really sure if it's based off of, him being gone and our timing or if there's something else going on. So when we went to the specialist, a fertility specialist, the doctor said that I had endometriosis. I didn't know at the time what that was. Like I started, of course, after that appointment, I went home and started Googling, was trying to figure out, all the things, what that meant. And, the doctor had said after that appointment that we would, have really hard time conceiving. So that was very disheartening to hear, but I also didn't quite take it to heart. Like I was like, well, this is one person's opinion and yeah, he's a doctor and the diagnosis could be accurate, but I also kind of had faith and just gave it to God. And we both actually just talked about it and said, let's, put it in God's hands. And, I'm one for not going down the path of really IVF or anything really to do with needles or I'm very hands-off mentality. So going down the path of IVF or fertility was just not something that was in the cards for us. So if that was going to be the case, we had just discussed maybe adopting in the future. So we left that appointment and we did our anniversary trip in March. Just after we got back, Dave was getting ready to go leave for an airline trip. And I knew I was a little bit late, and my period is usually right on schedule with like timing, and it's pretty regular. And so I was like, I'm going to go to the store and get a test and just see, and I'm not really sure if this means anything, or maybe I'm late because of stress or something, right? So I did that. And of course, Dave is midair. He's flying. And I take this test and it seems to be positive. So there's this like really bold line. And then next to it, this very, very faint line. And I'm like, what does this mean? So I found out that it was positive, and had to wait for Dave to get to his destination to call him on FaceTime to tell him the news. So overall, it was about 40 days or so from the time we went to that appointment at the fertility doctor to the time we found out we were pregnant. So it was really, really cool how that worked out. And, I trusted my gut on that, even if the diagnosis going back to the endometriosis is true. I just didn't have enough information to really cling to that, if you know what I mean. So,
yeah. So then how was that processing it, and how was early pregnancy for you?
That's a great question. So I knew of pregnancy and birth from, family and friends and hearing stories, but I never took it to heart until I found out I was pregnant. So then you do all the things, you go onto the computer and you start Googling, and it's not something I would advise people to do, but you start going on YouTube and, just kind of researching. I'm a very proactive, I want to know all the things about that topic that I am interested in. And because it's my body and I now I have this baby that I'm going to bring into the world, I need to figure out what my game plan is, especially going back to my fear of, needles, and just the epidural was just not something that I would be comfortable with. So I knew I had to go down a path that was more holistic and more natural for myself. So, which kind of brought fear on in and of itself, because I'm like, how am I going to give birth naturally, in 9 months from now? How is that going to play out? So, I did a lot of research, and one of the biggest websites that I can say thank God for is Evidence-Based Birth. That was one of the first official sites that I found that really spoke to me and really gave me the unbiased information, the research on birth.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, I was really impressed by all the stuff that Rebecca's been doing over the years, even since then. That was in the spring, summer of 2017. So that was a huge influence on my decisions to find out an evidence-based practice. What are these things that this hospital does and this midwifery group does? Like, what are my choices here? So I kind of took that and didn't quite understand how the whole insurance system works with having a baby, and how with the military, there's only certain places that you can go that are covered in your bubble of insurance. So that was another hurdle that we encountered next. So I went with an OB that my primary care doctor recommended, because the birth center that I was looking to, that's really close to our house, he had said, and I trusted, his opinion at the time, because this is all new ground for me, right? So he said that it was not a good place of quality care, and that I would be better off at this OB practice. And of course I listened and, went forth and signed on with them. So, but I learned the further I got into my pregnancy, when I would ask questions, because taking the advice I got from, evidence-based birth and these things that I was reading about, ask questions to your care provider and see what their, cesarean rate is, and see how they practice. I wasn't getting answers. I was kind of getting a little brushed off. The questions just weren't being answered directly. So it was a little frustrating for me. So, at that point, I had a talk with my husband and I said, do people change providers? Like, is that a thing? I was like, because in my mind at the time, I thought, well, once you find a provider that you're stuck with them and it's like a law, like you're like set in this, bubble of, you have to go with this person because of insurance, because of, they know your history. And I just thought it was something that people don't really do. But that's not the case. So we found another provider who had midwives in the practice and also an OB. So it was like a combined mixture of 4 or 5 doctors, but they also practiced at a hospital as well. So putting aside the birth center that I still had in the back of my mind because it was so close to our house, I wasn't going down that route because the birth center we found out didn't support, didn't cover for insurance purposes. So that was really frustrating. Being military, there's certain places that you can go and, but if the place doesn't cover or take your insurance at all, then you just can't, that's just not an option. So that was a little frustrating.
Yeah. So how did you kind of come to terms with that as far as preparing for your birth?
I knew that I wanted to take these steps to have a natural birth, as natural as possible. I knew I was low risk, there was no issues, in the pregnancy. I knew how important it was for me to come up with a birth plan. So then I found this amazing person. She became my doula. Her name's Michelle. And I like to say in some ways she saved my life, but she really helped put my whole mind at ease about these different things and, showed me these are your options in town. She's very familiar with, all the different practices. And she also teaches prenatal yoga. So I would go to her yoga classes. She has this very calming and peaceful presence about her. And on top of that, so we hired her to be my doula, and she also teaches Hypnobabies. So I was at first when I read about, all this stuff that she teaches and Hypnobabies, I was like a complete skeptic. I was like, this is kind of weird, a little too crunchy for me. But the further I researched it and I asked her about it when we had our interview, I thought it was kind of something that could help me, especially knowing my personality and somebody that's very, driven with distractions, and I try to people please. So if I'm in this room giving birth and I'm trying to give somebody a sandwich, it's not going to help me to be calm and try to please everybody else when I need to figure out, I need to have this bubble of peace around me and focus on me. So she was really helpful in getting me into this mindset of, this is about you and your choices, your birth. And Hypnobabies was a huge part of that. And for those listening who aren't familiar, there is also hypnobirthing. I'm not really sure the full differences, but the Hypnobabies course is what I took, which was a 6-week, course that you kind of reframe your thinking of birth, and you change your words a little bit to be more positive, and you don't let the negative come in, and you listen to these really encouraging tracks to help frame your mind around birth. And it's this empowering experience. So it really helped me out in that process.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll have to, if you have the one you did, you can link to it and we'll share it there. Is there anything else from your pregnancy that you want to share, or do you want to go ahead and start with your birth story?
Yeah. So going back to a little bit more about the pregnancy, okay. I switched the provider again. And this is so funny. I'm thankful, but it was a little stressful. But just for everybody listening, if you're not sure if you can switch, and leading up all the way to the end of your pregnancy, I actually switched again at 37 weeks.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I've heard a few of those, but not many. So how did that go?
Yeah, I was online looking at the social media platforms of the birth center because I followed it at the time, and it said now accepting so-and-so insurance, military families are welcome here. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I told Dave, and that was the deciding factor, because that's what we really wanted. And that environment, because we had done a tour of the place, had this bed, and it looked like like a hotel room with like this big, birthing suite. And we really like just fell in love with it. But then we were told, oh, we don't take your insurance. So when we found that out, we immediately, I think the day of, it was early December, and our daughter was expected to be born, the first week of January. So we called right away and said, hey, we want to get on board and switch, because we already knew the midwives, and we already knew the group of people, and we knew that was where we wanted to be, especially with it being, 4 or 5 minutes from our house, which was another cool thing. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then I think once we switched, I think that's when my body was I felt like at peace, and I felt like everything was kind of falling into place because, and going back to the reason I wasn't still comfortable at the other practice, like they were a great team of people, but they were still in hospital, and they still had these policies of, they required a hep lock, they required you to be in your bed, they required continuous monitoring. And these things, I just, from reading all the stuff of evidence-based birth, weren't something that I was comfortable doing personally, because I read the evidence and just different things that, weren't on my birth plan that I didn't want. So I was very thankful to, see that and make the change. And, they gladly accepted us as a client. So, yeah.
All right. So how did labor start for you?
So I started to feel like slight cramping. It was around dinner time. And this was 2 days before her actual due date, before our daughter was supposed to be born. And so you just don't, you hear, most moms first time around will go a little bit further than, 40 weeks, but I was 39, 5 days, and, it was dinner, and I was like, I think something's happening. And, I wasn't anything too intense. It was something I could handle. But I still got worked up, and I think I have a little bit of anxiety because I didn't know what to expect. And I'm like, is this it? Or maybe I'm just not feeling well or something. And so, I told my husband, and he called the doula and talked to Michelle, and she was like, just relax, try to get some rest. And she told me later on that they can usually tell if it's labor or not, especially active labor, if you can't really talk through them. And I could talk normally, but the way I was breathing and all these different factors, she could kind of pick up that, something was happening. So it was really, once again, it was really just a godsend to have her as like a right-hand extra person to be there and to know all the signs of birth and what I was going through. So I took her advice, of course. And I took a bath and lay down and put my Hypnobabies tracks in and listened to fear clearing track and, birthing day, and just like fell asleep for a few hours, which was great. That's one of the best things I think, looking back, that probably saved me from being exhausted the next day, was being able to get some sleep. So I woke up at around like 2:30 in the morning to really strong contractions, like to the point where I had to shoot out of bed, and I tapped Dave, and I was like, hey, this is like really intense, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. And of course he's like, get on the birth ball and put your tracks in and, calm and breathe. And he kept me in check in that. So he called the midwife, and then we called our doula. And about an hour or so later, we headed over to the birth center, which was like a 5-minute drive, if that, maybe 4 minutes. And I remember that drive. It was so short. And I feel for moms. I've heard so many other moms say like they had like a 30-minute drive, or, 20 minutes even seems like forever. But that 5-minute car ride was just miserable. And I'm so thankful because before we had switched, the hospital that we were at was like 45 minutes. And I was thinking that would have been very difficult to do at this point. So, so we got to the birth center, he parked the car, and the midwife and my doula were there waiting and took me up to the room. And then once Dave arrived, they asked if I wanted to be checked, which was so cool because throughout the entire pregnancy, that was the only time I had an actual internal cervical check, which was really cool because, that's something else that I read is it's important to limit that. And so she checked me and I was dilated to 7 centimeters. Now, Dave, when I asked him, what's my progress, I had gone to the bathroom and I was like, well, what did she say? What's the midwife? What'd she say? How far along? And he's like, you're doing great. Like, he didn't tell me because he knew that I would get in my head and overthink it and be like, only 7. Because, at this point, I think I was going through transition. So, so I'm so appreciative that he didn't tell me that in the moment. I look back and I think that's a great thing that he did. But now the second time around, I knew right away. I was like, tell me right now, but we'll get to that. I wasn't patient enough in the second time around. But so I was 7 centimeters. And so then I felt like I wanted to try the water to get into the birthing tub, which was in the room, close to the bed. And it was just like this beautiful space of like, the lights were dim, it was so peaceful in this environment. The cool thing about all this was the midwife had this handheld monitor. Every 20, 30 minutes, she would check the baby's heart rate, make sure, baby's doing good and all that. But she would follow me around. I have this one picture that she's doing like a deep squat because I'm swaying and like dancing over my husband standing, and she's just squatting to try to get a read on baby. And I just think that's so cool how she was helping me, just following me and serving me. And I felt so at peace and just respected in that. So I thought that was really cool. So I spent some time in the tub and then I got out because I was starting to get cold. So went back to the bed and labored there for a little bit. And then my doula suggested, she was probably seeing the signs, but she suggested that I take a walk, around like down the hall and come back and, keep things moving. And she's so smart. She knows like all the things. Right. And so I did that. And of course I have Dave right there with me and I'm like holding on to him. And I remember, this was 3-4 years ago now, like yesterday, that was the worst walk ever. I did not want to get out of that bed. I did not want to get up. And I kind of like fought it. And I was like, I just want to stay here. But Dave encouraged me and I got out of the bed and started walking and used him for support because they were very, very intense contractions at this point. So, but it was good. Once we got back into the birthing suite, I gently whispered to my doula, I was like, I think I have to go to the bathroom. Like I have to go number 2. Right. And she let out the funniest laugh. And, I was like, why is she laughing about that? And she's like, that's good, Jen. That's really good. And so, I learned that's a sign too of getting ready to push. So that was cool. It encouraged me too, that she said that because I knew that, this whole process was coming to an end because it's very tough. It was very intense. And, I don't have any pain medicine. I don't have an epidural, which at the time I was like, maybe I should have considered that because it was getting pretty intense. So I went back to the tub. I got back in the water, which really seemed to help with the contractions, and turned on more of my Hypnobabies tracks, and that really seemed to help. So the next couple hours kind of seems like a little bit of a blur because I pushed for about 3 hours. It took a little bit longer. I learned later on from my midwife because I had a cervical lip. So when she started to see baby crown, like her head, she could see that the cervix was kind of in the way. So then she helped with that and mitigated, holding it back and that kind of thing. So once I pushed toward the end of this 3-hour block, baby's head was born. And then with the next push, she came out, and the midwife did have to undo the cord around her neck, but there was no breathing issue. She put her right on my chest. And I remember it being the most, beautiful, empowering, but also a little bit weird. Like this slimy like baby on me. And then of course, after all that work, I felt a little bit like, wow, this is real. Like it totally hit me like this aha moment of, okay, you just birthed this baby and now what? Like this is whole new like world of, coming into that light as a mother. So I had this really cool moment. And just before she came out, my body knew what it was doing and all this stuff. I had this moment where I was like, I need this blanket. Dave, I was like, get me the blanket I brought, the star blanket. It was like this pink, cute, beautiful little blanket that I wanted pictures of her in. And at the moment, right before I pushed, this is all I could think about was this blanket. So I recall that being a funny moment because the midwife and the assistant and my doula were all laughing and like, in the heat of that. So that was cool.
That's funny, the things that we like have our minds set on.
Right.
All right. So is there anything you want to share from this postpartum experience? The biggest thing that I struggled with is just adapting to that new flow of no sleep. Like that was so hard for me. I honestly look back and I would give birth again. Like I would do that birth all over again, like the labor and stuff, then not have sleep. Like that's just really tough for me not to go from like 8 hours of sleep or, to like a couple hours at a time. So that was very hard. And breastfeeding was a journey too. That was, new. And, you can read all the books about breastfeeding, but until you actually do it, it's hard to, grasp. And then, but my milk came in, a few days later and I did well and, she latched great. And, but it's just it's a learning process, so. Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's transition a little bit here to your second. How did that go for you?
Yeah, so we knew we wanted to start trying for more, and we knew we also wanted Julie, our daughter, to have a sibling close in age. Maybe not this close, but we the first time we actually started trying, we actually got pregnant. Unfortunately, my grandmother had just passed within a week of me finding out. So it was a very, very difficult time, like the first trimester for me with that loss, and then finding out I'm pregnant. So, I feel terrible, like even just saying that because there's so many, women who struggle with getting pregnant. And so here I had this grieving process I had to get through to actually be happy and really enjoy, welcoming another kid into our family. So it was tough at first. And then on top of that, you have toddler, this, she just turned 1. My daughter had just turned 1 year old when we found out as well. So I'm chasing this 1-year-old around and, I didn't have terrible morning sickness with my daughter, but I kid you not, the first 3 months of this pregnancy, the second one, I felt terrible. Like I didn't get sick per se. I just felt like I was going to be sick all the time. So in a way, I thought it would be better if I just got sick and just would feel better, but that didn't happen. I just kept feeling nauseous and lived off of saltine crackers and ginger ale. And I told my husband he could never cook fish in the house until I felt better, felt kind of normal, in the second trimester. But that was just really tough, having this toddler and then, going through all this stuff. So once I hit, the second trimester, about 12 weeks in, it seemed to just kind of dissipate, which was a blessing because I couldn't have endured any more of that constant sickness feeling, day in and day out. So.
And did you have the same care provider team selected?
Oh, good question. So my husband was offered an opportunity to advance his schooling and get some military schooling in. So we actually moved for a year to a military move to Pennsylvania. So
wow.
we knew, So I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that on top of, all these life changes, we were getting ready to move back to Jacksonville in the summer. So we find out we're pregnant with baby number 2 in January, and we're in Pennsylvania where there's like 3 feet of snow outside. It's like a whole different environment. So I was with a practice, an OB practice at this major hospital downtown Harrisburg area in Pennsylvania. So they were great. They were your standard, OB care, a team of like 12 doctors, and there was 2 midwives on staff, and, they were very nice people. And, but I was very excited that with the timing of how we were moving back, that I would be back at the birth center where I had my daughter. So I went through the appointments and care, knowing that, this wasn't going to be the end result of where I was going to give birth to my son. So once we, figured out our next move with moving back, it was, sometime in June, I learned that the birth center was closing down, actually a month or 2 before I was due. So that was it was a very, very tough, like, my pregnancy was healthy and the baby was healthy, but emotionally I felt like I had a lot of very tough events happen, like in that span of that pregnancy, with like getting ready to move back home, the struggle of, we had to find a house, and moving with a toddler. And then on top of that, being pregnant. So it was very stressful in that sense, with all these major life events happening around me. So
yeah, it's a lot. I think that you basically are ticking every, like, what are they, like the big life stressors? It's like a lot of those boxes: new job, moving, loss, pregnancy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else from pregnancy you want to share, or move to the birth story?
With the pregnancy, when I ended care, we moved back to Jacksonville and I switched, providers, finding a care provider was actually really cool. I stumbled across this group. Let me back up. My doula, I used her again for this, my second baby, as support, and did like sit in on the Hypnobabies again, just to kind of get a refresher. Mm-hmm. And she referred me to people that she's also good friends with, a midwifery group in Jacksonville that does Homebirth. And I looked at her and I was like, that kind of, I don't know if I would be a good candidate, or how does that work? And like, do you think I could do that? And she's like, oh yeah, you're like perfect for that, Jen. And she like gave me that encouragement that I needed, because even though this is my second and, everything went well the first time around, I still had my fears. And on top of that, everybody that I talked to when I mentioned home birth was so negative and so like, well, what if an emergency? What if there's like a problem? And I'm just like, why can't you just support my decision to like consider this? And I just got a lot of kickback, including my mom. And I get it comes from a place of love and concern. But after a couple of those conversations, I just stopped talking about it. So that was a little disheartening, but I trusted my doula and what she was telling me, that I would be okay for that. And so yeah, I went forth and, went to this midwifery group. And the cool thing about it was I later discovered that the owner of the woman in charge of this midwifery practice founded the birth center that closed. So I thought that was really special, because I was so upset that they closed down, and now this person who helped create that space is still kind of in my care. So I thought that was really cool to have. And she was potentially going to be on call for my home birth. So it was cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you want to talk about how labor started for you this time?
Yes. It was a Saturday, and we had gone to the beach as a family. A little emotional, because it was close to our last, one of our last gatherings is just the 3 of us, and spending time with my daughter before, baby number 2 came. And I was actually approaching 42 weeks. So I was kind of stressed out. And so that's why my husband was like, let's go to the beach. Let's just take it easy, because they were talking of inducing me if I was going to, in a couple of days, if I was going to reach 42 weeks, they wanted to do a membrane sweep. So that made me nervous a little bit because I'm very hands-off type person, and anything that interferes with, the natural way of labor in my body, I just wasn't comfortable with. So that kind of made me nervous and, what to expect there. So, and then if I went further than 42 weeks, if they were to do that, then I would have to be at a hospital. So all these things were going through my mind. So we went to the beach, and then we got home. I felt a lot better after that and just kind of relaxed. And, my husband, he's such a great support, and he gives me peace a lot of times in these stressful situations. And I think that comes with his demeanor and his personality, which is a good fit for me. So we get back, and, I lay down for a nap, and I wake up and I start feeling contractions. And I, once again, like just slight cramping and the basic, okay, this might be it, and then I ignored it. And I texted my doula and kind of let her know what was going on, and said, this could be it. So she's like, well, stay close to your phone and, let me know if things change. And so from that point, they gradually got more intense. I made dinner. Oh, funny thing. I didn't do this the first time around, but I wanted to make sure I had makeup on because I wanted pictures for the home birth. I thought it was really kind of cool to be able to look kind of halfway decent in these pictures. So I did my full face of makeup. And it's silly, like kind of looking back, but I'm thankful because I didn't look like death in my photos. But so that was cool to do that and just kind of keep my mind off the contractions and the intensity. So then I cooked dinner, and then after that, it got really intense. And, one thing that we didn't do our, like, we call it like a dry run for like your birthing tub. So we had to buy this birthing tub, fill it up, set it up in a space that was, good, and there was room. And, we didn't go through all that. We didn't figure out our game plan. We knew we were going to have it in our bedroom. So Dave, while I'm going through contractions and, I need him next to me to kind of give me that support and, use his hand, he's trying to set up the tub while I'm trying to, use him to like channel these intense contractions that I'm going through on the bed. And it was so different because I experienced what I think were more intense contractions because I was not in water like I was the first time around. So it was very, very interesting. And I picked that up rather quickly. So I was like, hurry and get this tub like fixed. But he's, the doula's not here yet. Michelle hadn't shown up yet to kind of help me so he can get the pool set up. So that was, looking back, it's funny now, but in the moment I was like, this is way different than going through these intense, contractions than if I was in water. So, but later on I learned that point, those really strong contractions was actually transition. It was a lot quicker than my first birth because the midwife, they showed up around, I think it was like 10:30, 11 p.m. And I was already complete when she checked me. The very first time she checked me, she's like, Jen, you're 10 centimeters and, you're going to be, maybe pushing here in like an hour or so. And I was like, what? I was like, that is so cool. Cause I was ready to be done with that whole thing. It's pretty intense, like I said. So finally, the birth tub is set up and I get in, and it feels so amazing. I felt like a weight was lifted off my stomach and my back. And just if you have the opportunity to birth in water, I highly recommend it. Or even just getting that relief before you head to the hospital or, wherever you're going. So, definitely huge help. And within an hour of getting into the tub, I started to feel the urge to push, and I was up on all fours, and my midwife, she had it was, a different midwife from the first time, but she had this handheld Doppler and, had her assistant helping with check the baby's, heart rate, make sure everything was good and everything was fine. And then my water broke in the water. So then this is the part that gets kind of fuzzy, and that looking back, I didn't know at the time what was happening, but she asked me to turn over onto my back. So kind of like upright, but Dave, he was behind me, like supporting me in the tub. And I turn over and I'm pushing involuntarily. And so my son, his head was born. And then I feel her proceed to pull, which was so painful. And I immediately stopped her and said, can you wait? Like, that hurts. Like, can you just wait until the next contraction? And it kind of blindsided me a little bit because it was unexpected and I didn't know why she was pulling. I learned later on that she said she was seeing the signs of this thing called turtleneck or something like that. It's related to maybe shoulder dystocia, like a sign of shoulder dystocia.
Okay.
So yeah, I had never heard of that. So that was her reasoning on that. So that was a little scary because that was very painful when she tried to pull. And then, once she did wait and stopped when I asked her to. And then the next contraction, I pushed him out and he was completely fine. No issues there, but yeah, so that was a scary moment. And then she immediately put him onto my chest. And, one of the cool things about this moment was he let out this cry that I was so different from Julie. It was like, cause I was like 41 weeks, like 4 days. It was like this cry of why am I out here? Like, I am cold. I did not want to come out. Like, he was, it took some time. Like, it was about an hour maybe of pushing, but that cry, I'll never forget it. It was this like screaming cry of, why did you disturb my peaceful, warm inner, circle of warmth inside? So it was really cool. But, yeah. So, and that was birth of my son. And, my sister, one of the cool things about right after he was born, my sister was here because she was watching her daughter in case she woke up and she could just take Julie, because I didn't want Julie. She was too young to be in the room and kind of be a part, in my opinion. I didn't know if that would, be appropriate. So she was on niece duty, right? And so my doula, I had her to go wake my sister up to come in here and see James, her nephew, and because she had her fears too. She was one of the few that was like, I don't know if that's safe. Like, what's your game plan? And so for her seeing, this happy, healthy baby born at home was really cool. And she tells me later, like, that was like the coolest experience. And she got to see, him within a few minutes of him being born. So she was like, has that honor of being one of the first to meet her nephew. So I thought that was really special. So.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
So having another postpartum experience under your belt, was there anything different this time that you wanted to share about?
Yeah. So I thought that I knew, okay, I had breastfed before, and my daughter, I breastfed her, for about 6 months. So it wasn't super long. I didn't have enough supply. And so I supplemented with formula with her. And I said, okay, so I planned it out. I got support. I read all the things to try to breastfeed for at least a year or longer with my second. And, I thought I knew, I thought I knew what I was doing. And I did my best, and I got, advice, and my doula helped me. I had some issues. A week after my son was born, I got mastitis. He slept longer than I had, realized that I needed to pump or feed. And it was just a little bit longer than I anticipated. I went too long without relieving myself. So I learned it was a very painful experience. And if anybody's been through mastitis, like the fever and the chills and like the pain associated, because then on top of, going through that and trying to break your fever, you have to keep breastfeeding or pumping on that, same breast. And that was very, very tough for me. But it was also a lesson learned, because I thought I knew what I was doing because I had breastfed before and was like this, I've done this before, and it was different with every child. So if we were to have more in the future, I know better than to just be like, I'm a pro at breastfeeding, because there's always a different, pattern of sleep, and these kids they're unique in their own way and how they feed. So, it was a good learning experience for me, but not something I would wish on anybody, because it was very tough to go through. So that was, yeah.
Yeah, these babies keep us on our toes. For sure.
For
You
sure.
never know. All right. Well, then, are there any resources that you wanted to add here?
Yeah. Well, my number one thing, because after my experience, I became certified in childbirth education through Lamaze. So whether you are, expecting a baby or you're on your third baby, just get educated. That's really all I want to say, is just take a childbirth class, and, somebody that's, certified, and whether Bradley or Lamaze or, somewhere, and just get that good education under your belt. It'll really help you. And the biggest one I want to mention is Rebecca Decker, Evidence-Based Birth. Man, she just rocks, and she's always updating the evidence and always current. And yeah, I just highly recommend her website.
Yeah, her social media is great too, and she has a podcast now, so we'll link to those things.
Yes, that's right. Another one, kellymom.com. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's really great for breastfeeding support. And if you're, breastfeeding, or there's something going on in like 2 a.m, and you just get on that website, it's credible. It's great, great resources on breastfeeding, and even just if you aren't breastfeeding or pumping, or how often do this, or what does this mean? It's just really helpful. Great website to use.
Yeah, anytime I have a breastfeeding question, I would just type in the question and then Kelly Mom at the end, so that it would bring that site up. It's like the evidence-based birth site for breastfeeding.
Yes, and that's how I found Kelly Mom, was through one of Rebecca's one of her videos that she did. Yeah. I took her childbirth class, so It was cool. But yeah, so just the biggest takeaway is, get educated. It's really important to have that. So.
All right. And then did you want to share where people can connect with you?
Yeah, sure. I do have Instagram. It's Genny, and that's Genny with a G. Genny Childbirth Class, and that's all one word.
All right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Genny.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Bren, and keep up, all the hard work. You guys are truly amazing what you're doing here.
Okay, now we're going to chat with Trisha from Peanut, today's sponsor. And don't forget, you can go to thebirthhour.com/peanut to get a direct link to download the app, or you can search for it in your app store and download it for free today. Hi, Trisha. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to chat with me about Peanut.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. Can you start by telling listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do for Peanut?
Sure. My name is Trisha Bowden, and I lead the Peanut Ambassador MVP program. So our MVPs are our most valued peanuts, and they're basically our feet on the ground. They're helping to spread the word about the peanut community and to help us grow.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I bet it's changed a little bit during the pandemic.
It has, but it's gotten more interesting. I mean, it's a very unique ambassador program where these are just, our everyday users. It's not, it's unlike your typical ambassador programs where you look for, influencers and followers. These are really just women who are going through different life stages, whether it be trying to conceive or pregnancy and motherhood, and are just really trying to help spread the word and provide the support. And we give them the flexibility of hours, and they get compensated for it. So it's a really great opportunity for them.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm always amazed by the power of like a mom spreading the word, just online or in person. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Peanut and just what it is and how it works.
Sure. So Peanut is really an app that helps you get through all stages of motherhood. So from the very moment that you think about becoming a mother, when you're trying to conceive or navigating fertility, to expecting and being pregnant, through going through adoption processes and surrogacy, and of course, being a mother. Peanut provides that support. And what we do is we really help connect women to one another who are in the similar life stages. For me, it was, I was a new mom, and I was looking for a friend that was nearby that had a child the same age, where we could just meet up at the park and kind of connect on different experiences that we were going through. But other times, women are really navigating very specific circumstances, and we're able to kind of find the right person to connect you with to help you get through that. So you can get that support, ask questions. And alongside that, outside of connecting you with woman to woman, it's support groups. So there's lots of topic groups, such as expecting, fertility, postpartum support, where you can really find like your pretty much like group of moms and your community. There's also some serious topics that the groups center around, like abuse, mental health issues, and then things that some moms just find a really hard time relating to, which is, raising a child with special needs.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how specific it gets. When I created my account, it asks like all your different interests, and there's so many to choose from. And then I just played around with it a little bit to see what the different options would lead me. So I tried the trying to conceive option, and it shows me this personalized feed of other people who are kind of in the same stage, which is so cool. And then I tried it for pregnancy, and it allows you to put in how many weeks along you are. And then it's showing people who are, similarly 16 weeks along and that kind of thing. And it's like almost like a personalized feed that you would see on another social media app, but it's, takes it to another level. And then I can tell from the way that it worked to sign in that it's much more secure and private. Can you talk about that aspect?
Yes. So the women on our platform are really protected by our safety measures. I mean, we don't let anybody on the platform unless they're verified. And it's really a place where you can talk about anything. Again, back to very simple, just getting tips on motherhood or raising your child, or, is this normal? I'm at X, my 9th month of pregnancy and I'm feeling this. The things that are a bit more private, even issues around sex, which can be fun, but also very serious. Mm-hmm. We make sure that we protect our users and that, you have the option of being incognito if that's something that makes you feel comfortable. But it really is a safe place where you can open up and find that support, where on other platforms you wouldn't.
Right. So one of the ways it seemed like the verification was happening was through, it had me take like a selfie. It was, it said, this is not anything that's going to be put on your profile, but we just want to see that you're a real person. So that only works in that moment through your phone versus someone like uploading a selfie, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So there's a few different features, like you said, the groups and the support, but then there's also this ability to, make a one-on-one friend, like maybe a dating app. So can you explain how that works?
Right. So when you first download Peanut, you're basically creating your profile and you're indicating certain things about yourself, like where you live, different interests that you like. Mine personally is like wine time, food first. That's all me. And then you can indicate what stage you are in terms of your journey through motherhood. So whether you're trying to conceive, a mother, and how old your children are, or pregnant, we will basically introduce you to moms that are at the similar life stage and in your location if you choose. You also have the option of expanding your location. But really, that's what it's about, is like matchmaking on the level of finding someone to go along that journey with, that you can relate to, that you can ask questions to, and that can support one another.
Yeah, it seems like it's very like the intelligence behind it is very specific with finding the right groups for you. When I signed up, it like knew my neighborhood group, not just my city, and, sent me an invitation if I wanted to join that. So making, those connections really close to home, which is very convenient when you have weird nap schedules and all kinds of things going on with kids.
Right. Especially if you're pregnant, what we're doing now is we're calling it Bump Buddies, is when you do download Peanut and you indicate your birth month or expected due date, we will automatically put you in a group with other women with the same due date. So that's just a really great thing to do, because at that point you're already in a group with so many women that are going through likely the same thing as you. So that's when kind of like you really need it most.
That's cool. So working with the ambassadors, have you heard any really great stories that you want to share, or ways that people love to use the app more than, all the other ways? There's anything that stands out that you want to share?
Sure. There's actually a really interesting story about one of our MVPs. She's in New York City. Her name is Sam, and she is pregnant with her second child, or was pregnant with her second child during COVID, right? Her due date was in May. And unfortunately, none of her family from out of state could come in to help. And her husband was a doctor. So it really was kind of like a crunch time for her to figure out what is she going to do with her toddler if she has to go in for delivery, at an unexpected moment. So she had met another woman on Peanut in a similar neighborhood to her, adjacent to hers in New York City, who happened to also become an ambassador. And they became such great friends that when she did give birth, she asked this mom, this fellow MVP, to come in and watch her son while she was in the hospital. And she did. And that was just such an amazing story. So sweet. She took pictures of when she gave birth at the hospital, and she had such a proud look on her face. They were beautiful. And she shared these pictures and her story about meeting this wonderful friend on Peanut across all of these other social groups that she's part of. And that actually really, emotionally triggered these women. And they saw what the power can be when you have a great support system. And it actually helped her grow the Peanut community.
That is so cool. I just got goosebumps hearing that. Yeah, I think that really speaks to the whole it takes a village aspect that's so hard to find these days when we move around a lot and maybe aren't, staying in the same city our whole lives. So I love that y'all are helping make those connections happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you might use Peanut in different ways when you're at different stages in your life. And I've kind of been through a few. I joined Peanut in 2017, right after I had my son. We lived in California. He was 1 year old, and we decided to move back to New York where our families were. But I didn't have any mom friends with children the same age. And I was really like, I need to find a mom friend. So as we all need sound, I Googled making mom friends, and I came across Peanut. And then that's how I got on the app, and I was able to make a couple of mom friends I could just go to the park with and hang out and have play dates. And it was really great. After that point, I kind of just got more into the community groups and just looking for advice on the different milestones that occur between the ages of 1 and 2. And then I found myself using Peanut for another reason, because we were trying to conceive again and having our second child. And unfortunately, I had a miscarriage, which just even changed the way that I use Peanut more so, because then I found out I had a uterus abnormality, which I'd never heard of. So naturally, I was just looking for others who might have the same thing or have heard of it or could shed any, advice. And what was so great within Peanut is that I found very specific groups that were created by women that had the same thing, but they all were trying to keep all of the support in a positive manner. There weren't any, negative stories about that. Everyone was just it's going to be okay. I have the same thing, but look what turned out. I have this beautiful son. And that was so important for me, because I had this miscarriage right in the beginning of COVID. So I really needed it.
Yeah, that's so important to be able to find that support. And like you said, a positive place versus maybe going down a Google rabbit hole or something.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you so much, Bryn.
Thank you so much again to Genny for sharing her birth story with us. If you want more information from today's episode, you can head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Genny's name in the search bar, and her episode show notes will come up for you. I will also link to her husband's recording on the Partner podcast via Patreon, so you can check that out if you'd like. And thank you so much again to Peanut for sponsoring this episode. If you want to try out the Peanut app, head over to thebirthhour.com/peanut, and it'll just open the app up for you, and you'll be able to get it right from there. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.